Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansbury.
And Amy Cornell.
And I know we talk in varying degrees about mistakes that we want you to avoid. That's kind of the whole premise of why we do the show, right?
Yeah.
But I was at a couple of conferences actually in person recently, and I think that it's really good for you to understand things that don't really work, things that kind of will make you look like an amateur. And that's where sometimes authors get taken advantage of. So that's part of the other reason for the show. And look, at one point or another, everyone is a beginner. And I always tell authors, like my first book, I made so many mistakes and it was so hideous that it was just not, I learned every single lesson the hard way. But, rookie mistakes can really kill your success. And like I said, again, you do not want to look like an amateur because people won't take you seriously and will get you, may take advantage of you. So the first one I would say is sending a press release for your book launch. There's a book published every 8 seconds in this country. Do not waste your time or effort on sending a press release for your book launch. I have not written a press release. Amy, we've worked together for 13 years. Magic 13. When was the last time that we sent a press release?
It's been a very long time, over a decade ago, at least.
Oh, at least. Yeah. And it's not that, look, we're very excited. I get very, very excited every time I release a book. I'm finishing up the workbook for the Amazon Author Formula, and I'm really excited it's almost done. I get it, but a press release has to be something really newsworthy. And save the press releases for, like your millionth book sale or something that's really, really big. And we get authors who say, I'm working with a publishing company or whatever, and they sold me a press release package, and I just want to beat my head against the wall. So that's the first one. Do you want to take the second one?
Yeah. Oh, the press release thing. Yeah. And I'm glad you just flat out said it, Penny, because I think the quicker we can get over what about this? What about this? I think the quicker we can decide, like, okay, that's not going to work for me, move on.
Yeah.
The better off most authors will be. And so I so appreciate that you flat out said releasing a book isn't news anymore.
Right.
It just isn't, unless you're a household name, unless you're a celebrity or something like that. And even then, like, we can all agree it's questionable whether or not even that is news, but for what it's worth, but yeah, it's not.
But and the other thing though, too, that I neglected to mention is that I think when you do, sending out a press release builds a set of expectations that a press release really can never live up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where, so part of the other reason that we wanted to do this show is because when you're doing the wrong things, it really diminishes your momentum. And sending a press release and waiting for something really fun and exciting to happen is not fun when nothing fun and exciting happens. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I that's a very good point. A press release should be, you're saying this is news, but you have to remember anybody that's on the receiving end of that, if you manage to even catch their attention, they're going to do their due diligence. So if they go to Amazon and you don't have any reviews yet, you don't have it, you know what I mean? You don't have your author bio filled out. Like, talk about a terrible first impression.
Yeah.
That you'll never be able to shake off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good point, Penny, that yeah, if you're going to go there, make sure you have something that is actually newsworthy, interesting, impressive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It can't just be the announcement. Like, I showed up to the party, get excited about me,
Right. Right. Exactly. Because then it's a bummer when nobody when nobody gets excited except mom, right?
Right, exactly. And this one is kind of similarly, it's linked. So the next one we want to make sure we cover is delaying a book launch because you don't have endorsements for the back of your book yet. And we love endorsements. We think it's a great thing. If you have a network, either a professional or personal network somehow that you can tap into to either get professional endorsements, or again, some, even fiction authors, they network with other fiction authors that have larger platforms and they get blurbs from them, which is also fabulous. Like, I love seeing that even more than nonfiction, Penny, because it's so great to see authors supporting other authors in that way. It always just, I always get like a smile on my face when I see that another fiction author has written something for a fellow fiction author. I don't know why. That just always hits a little bit different for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and same thing, we get this from clients still sometimes. They get really obsessive about the back of the book description. So similar to endorsements, the back of the book, unless your book is in a retail store and you all like have plans for that, not like, yeah, I want to be in stores someday. Like, you legit already have it set up for distribution in a retail store. The majority of the people that come into contact with your book, it's going to be online. The back cover will be not really a thing. It's not going to be what convinces them to click buy for the majority of your shoppers.
Yeah. 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 And that is something that we talked about this early on. That is something that is an antiquated, it's an antiquated strategy. So we love endorsements, but if you're thinking about endorsements, think about your Amazon book page, right? Think about, that's really where they belong. I mean, if you have great, like, again, as Amy said, we did a whole show on independent bookstores, and we've done a whole show on, regular bookstores and all that. We love bookstores. If your book is going to be in a bookstore, awesome. But back of the book endorsements are just not just not really a thing anymore,
No, they're not. And I agree with you, Penny. Like, this is one of those things too. We talk about this a lot. Maybe we've got another timeline show coming up in the future that we can revisit this, because it really is important. But it's especially if you're new at this, it's hard figuring out what to do when, so endorsements, your back cover blurb, they're a thing, but they shouldn't be delaying something else that's more critical when your book is really new or getting ready to come out, if that makes sense. Like, putting them in the right spot in your timeline of things to do when you release a book, when you're launching your author brand, things like that. The back cover copy and those endorsements shouldn't come ahead of a lot of other critical elements that you really should be working on that will make a better first impression when you release that book.
Right. Exactly. And you can get endorsements. I mean, most of the authors that I've ever talked to and that we've worked with, they're getting endorsements and blurbs well throughout the life of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I think that, I used to do celebrity endorsements like a million years ago. And this was what I like to call BA. So before Amy. And because this would have made her absolutely crazy. And I used to do celebrity endorsements, and we can do a separate show about some of the crazy stuff that we've done in our careers. But it's a lot of work, and it can take a long time. And they're getting hit from all sides. And so, you've got to, and delaying a book, waiting on a celebrity endorsement, not even for the back cover, just waiting on a celebrity endorsement. I mean, if you have somebody and they're like Stephen King's like, oh yeah, I'm absolutely going to endorse your book, and just give me, whatever. And you've gotten that confirmation. Awesome. Knock yourself out. But if you just have a list of them and you're like, I want to wait until I get these 5 or 10 people or whatever, I'm telling you, I'll see you in 10 years. I mean, one of the reasons why I stopped doing celebrity endorsements was just because, oh my gosh, these were the days of faxes and FedExes. So I would FedEx a book, and somebody, like an assistant would take it home, or somebody would lose it, or, they're on location, or, I mean, it took me like 8 months to get one endorsement. And by then, they were like, oh, now we've delayed the book. Now we're just going to delay it another 6 months just because of publisher timing or whatever. Don't wait on that stuff. The other thing not to wait on is so I've talked to authors before, and this is something that came out of a recent conference that I was at. Launching a book and then waiting to see what happens and not doing anything to promote it. So that's like the caveat. So once again, I know we talk about this a lot, but there's a book published every 8 seconds in this country. So launching a book and then waiting to see what it does on its own does not work at all. And the longer that you wait to promote a book, the farther down that it sinks in the Amazon system, the harder it is to resurrect it. So we've had books that we've gotten that have been, and it's not that the author didn't do anything to promote it, or maybe they did the wrong things, or maybe they got busy, whatever. So we've had authors that will come to us later in the game. So maybe a year, the book has been out for a year or even 8 months. And, it's hard. I mean, we've done it just because we know the strategies to do it, but it's hard to get a book from, let's say, the 3 million sales rank up to the 20,000 or even 10,000 or 5,000 sales rank. And so the lower the sales rank, the more the book is selling. But it's hard to resurrect a book that has sunk down to the 3 million. And that's unfortunately what happens if you wait and see what happens. And the book just sits there with no reviews and nothing. Like it's, and I've said this for almost the entire time that I've been in business. Your book is not the field of dreams. Just because you put it up on Amazon, people are not going to beat a path to your door.
Right. I think that's so important. And I think the reviews, when you hit on that, is one of the most critical ones, because I can't tell you how often I'll go to a book and, someone will reach out and I will ask them. I mean, I'm genuinely curious what's been going on, because when we start making recommendations, we want to know what they've tried, what hasn't worked, you know what I mean? Things like that. But yeah, it just baffles me when authors, their book has been out for, 6 months or longer without a single review. It's like, not even your mom, like not even your, like nobody. Like, you don't have any friends that would do you a solid, at least to get that first one up there. And it's like, anybody listening, like, don't come at me with the terms of service and stuff like that. Like, but truly, like, not even tapping into your network. And like you said, Penny, just assuming that because it's up on Amazon, or that because you published a book, Amazon is going to do all the work for you, is, wildly misguided.
Yeah, it really is. And a book that languishes on Amazon, both from the just not doing anything to promote it, but then not having any reviews, it's like, if we get an author that is a year into the game and they have done nothing with this book and they have no reviews on Amazon, I mean, that gets to be a really, really hard climb too. So
it really does. Like, at that point, yes, start working on your brand. But honestly, that's when we start having serious conversations about the next book and doing things better the second time around.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a shame, it's a shame when we work so hard on our books and then throw it up there and you don't do anything with it. I mean, it's really a shame. It's really too bad.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one, editing, letting Word edit your book, or not paying for a good edit. This actually we had an example in our inbox this week, Penny. So this is very timely. And this author was very honest. They sent an inquiry. I went and checked out the book. I pulled up the sample, and it was very evident from the sample that the book had not gone through a professional editor. And I asked them about it, and they were quite honest and said, you know what? I paid for a really good editor for another one of my books, and then I couldn't afford the marketing. And so this time around, they write in a particular industry. So they asked someone else in that industry to look through the book. But we've talked about it so many different ways. Book editors are book editors. You know what I mean? Like, teachers are not book editors. Your best friend who loves to read is not a book editor. You know what I mean? Professionals are not book editors, even if they know a lot about the industry that they're in and they're a thought leader in their own right, does not make them a book editor. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it is just really, it's one of those things. And we've had this happen. We mentioned it on a show recently, a client whose book was not edited properly that went through a publisher. That was a whole other can of worms. But
Oh, that
the
was so
point
sad.
is, they ended up getting a really pretty harsh review
Oh,
because of it. And you can't come back from that. That review is going to stay there. Even if you put your book through another edit and there are, things to do to kind of make it known that the book has been edited and things like that, but still that review is going to be there. And it's really not worth taking the risk that nobody's going to notice, because somebody will notice. And I think we all know better nowadays. Sadly, people tend to speak up more when they're unhappy versus when they're happy. It's a harsh reality.
yeah.
But somebody who maybe wouldn't have posted a review if they enjoyed your book, if something's like was really wrong with the editing, they're going to get on there and let other readers know that, like, oof, yikes, don't bother. This is a train wreck, and it's very sad, but don't put yourself in that position. It's preventable.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel really bad for that author that you mentioned. I mean, it's just, it is really unfortunate, but editing is crucial. And unfortunately, there are a lot of AI tools outside of, Word. There are a lot of AI tools that authors are using to edit their books. And I'm like, oh man, there is nothing like a person with your book going through it, asking smart questions, especially, I mean, I was going to say, especially for, like my books, which are written, they have to be both accessible to authors and there's like, are you sure the author's going to the reader's going to understand what this means? And you know what I mean? But it really doesn't even, I mean, it's everybody, every single book needs a solid edit. I mean, I used to tell authors, you would never send your resume to an employer you would never send an unedited resume to your employer.
Yep.
And, the resume that was full of typos or whatever, why would you send a book that, into the world that wasn't properly edited? It's also disrespectful, frankly, to your reader.
Yeah.
It really is. The other thing that I find, I mean, so I was going to say disrespectful to your reader, but if you're self-designing your own cover, you may not get readers. And because your cover might not be really great. And look, and again, I get that there's a lot of AI tools out there to design covers. And I know some authors that actually do really, really well with this. So I'm not slamming AI's book cover design. But again, Amy and I talked about this in another podcast. You got to watch out for the hands, because I don't know what's wrong with AI, but man, the hands are always jacked up. It's very strange. But self-designing your own cover, I mean, I just think that we are too close, you should never cut your own hair or self-design your own book cover. I mean, I think that it's really, there are enough tools out there, and there are enough, frankly, not terribly expensive cover designers that can really help you produce a really beautiful, stunning cover.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for anybody listening that might be thinking, well, but I know how to use design programs or that kind of, but Penny, you touched on it and I want to emphasize it. You get too close to your own work. You know what I mean? So even if it's not always about the quality of the design, we've seen this happen before with clients where they've got too much going on the cover because they know the intricate details of the storyline and the subplots and all those things. And sometimes you see covers that have references to things in the book that on first impression as a shopper will make zero sense to them. You know what I mean? And it doesn't add to the appeal of the book. It just makes it confusing.
Right.
So I think that's another thing too that tends to happen with self-designed covers. I think more often than not, we tend to see that there are too many elements and too many different things going on because, again, you're too close to your own work. You know all the things about your book. You know all the fantastic elements that you've created and why the story is so amazing. But you really have to be able to put yourself in a shopper's shoes and look at it knowing nothing about the book, and the cover has to make sense for somebody that knows nothing about the book whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that is a very fine line to walk when you are trying to work on your own. And I think your point, Penny, about cover designers. If you have a concept, I think that's fabulous. Take your concept and then let somebody that does this for a living, that understands the world of book covers, that understands what's working in the market right now for certain genres and things like that, turn that into something that actually works for retail, because that's another thing too, is that you can have all these ideas, but there are still rules for what works in retail and what shoppers are drawn to. And book covers, we've said it before, that is not an area where you necessarily want to stand out as entirely unique. You don't want to go so far off the reservation with an entirely unique concept, because readers want to make easy buying decisions, right, Penny?
Yeah.
And if your cover doesn't align with the genre, doesn't align with your topic the way shoppers expect it to, that is not an easy decision for them. And they're more likely to move on to an easier buying decision than they are to spend time trying to figure out your book.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I completely agree with that. Yeah, the self-designing your own cover is just, it's a scary premise.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? We've said it before, and it's worth saying again, since we're talking about covers. Look at the bestseller list, look at a few of them. Not every single one is going to be, some of them I even go, well, okay, but the majority of them make sense and are really well done. And there's a reason they make sense for their genre or their topic. But do that research, do that self-education, because we've talked about it before. There are plenty of publishing companies out there that put out bad book covers, so don't assume because you're hiring a publishing service or going through a publisher of sorts that whatever they produce the first time around is going to be a slam dunk either, so go into collaborations like that with some education on what is working in your market and what people are buying, so you can do the necessary pushback if needed, if they produce a cover that you genuinely feel has no place on the bestseller list, because if that doesn't work, you're starting off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly right. I completely agree with that.
Okay, so we have, let's see.
What's the next one?
Yeah, this next one. We'll try to keep this one concise, but I think we'll have a hard time. So, and this is hard. Stop expecting everything you do to have some kind of ROI or return on investment. And we have this conversation a lot with our clients. We get it. You're investing money. Penny, you've said it a lot, and it's so true. Getting into this business is very much front loaded when it comes to the investment in developing your author brand, finding your footing in the market, getting your name out there to where anything is consistent. It is. It's definitely more front loaded. Each book, if you do things properly, will become easier in the terms of marketing and also in what you're having to reinvest into your machine as an author. But it's also cumulative, so to say, I spent this on this, why have I not sold 5 books because I did a discount ebook promotion, something like that. Let's say you discounted your Kindle book for a week. Well, I promoted it. I should have sold X number of books because I spent this much on the ad to go out. It's never that simple. And that's why this industry is so complex.
Yeah, no, that's a really, that is a really, really good point. It's never that simple. And there is almost no correlation to one thing, to having one thing sell you a bunch of books. And again, we don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. Like, I get it, but I talk to authors sometimes and they're like, I really like doing Facebook ads. I'm getting lots and lots of clicks on Facebook ads. I'm super excited. And I'm like, well, but you're getting a lot of clicks, but how many books are you selling? So a lot of it, sometimes it's a little deceptive too, right? You're looking for the ROI. You assume that the clicks on your Facebook ad are netting you ROI. You're selling books, but you're not really selling books. You're just getting a lot of clicks. So it's also, stop expecting everything to have, like, as Amy was saying, to have ROI, but it's also like, making better decisions about the things that you are doing too, right?
Yeah. And Penny, don't you think it makes more sense? It's hard. Like we get it. It's very hard, but it makes more sense to look at a wider timeline when you're trying to figure out if what you're doing is working. You know what I mean? If you're investing in the right things, both in like time and effort and money and things like that. Because if things aren't a direct one-to-one, you really kind of have to keep track of the work that you are doing to promote your book and what you're spending. And then look at the kind of sales you're generating over the course of 3 or even 6 months,
Yeah.
because not everybody, I would say most people don't buy a book the first time they're introduced to it, unless it's an author they already follow or something like that, or a direct recommendation from a friend. For the most part, people take their time when it comes to finally deciding to buy a book, because we talk about it all the time. Books aren't expensive, but they ask a lot of people's time. And time is not, it's a hot commodity. It's not something a lot of us have, in spades. So when we get a new book, it's because we are already pre-committing to spending a lot of time reading that book.
Yeah.
And so you don't, most people don't buy books just to stack it up on their, on their desk or their nightstand. These are thoughtful decisions. So what you're doing for your book in July might reach quite a few potential buyers that don't end up buying until the fall, or maybe even early winter. You really can't make, it's kind of like one of those chaotic string boards that really there's no rhyme or reason to it. You cannot force people to buy on a certain schedule, and you can't predict when they're finally going to click purchase either. Right. But so keep track of what you're doing for your promotions, what you're spending, and kind of play the long game in terms of figuring out if it starts to make sense,
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Amy, do you want to take the next one? Because I know that I feel like super passionate about the next one too.
Oh yeah,
but
absolutely. So the next one,
I would ramble on this one because I would just be. I'm a little over the top about this next one.
No. So in this one, this is mostly what our show is about, so I won't spend too much time on it, but avoiding self-education. So I can tell you from experience, working one-on-one with our clients throughout their campaigns, that there's a lot out there to figure out. I get it, but there are some basics that you really need to do some self-education on if you want to save yourself some grief, frustration, potentially some money, things like that. And the kind of things that I'm talking about, it's not learning everything about marketing, but really the kind of self-education that you really shouldn't put off are kind of basic concepts around the publishing industry, things like that. Penny, it amazes me still how many authors will be a month or two into their book release and still not really understand what using a publishing service means versus having being a KDP author.
Yeah.
Like these are the kind of things. And again, we get it. You don't know what you don't know, but I can tell you again from personal experience that there's a lot of grief around authors not figuring things out in advance of putting their book out there. So, kind of understand what your options are when it comes to understand your publishing situation. If you're using a publisher, know the basics of that. And if you don't know, ask. You know what I mean? Do a coaching session, do a consulting session, kind of say, okay, this is how I did this. What are my options? What can I not do? You know what I mean? I think more authors would save so much stress and grief, Penny, if they really understood what their options and limitations are at the start of their, author journey versus having to slam into those brick walls along the way and then try to regroup and figure out where they stand with everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And, I think that, and again, I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole with this because I love teaching. I'm teaching actually pretty much every Saturday in November, with I think the exception of just like around Thanksgiving or something. But I love teaching. I taught last week for the Alliance of Independent Authors, and I had something like, oh my gosh, I had over 100 people, I think, in the class. I mean, it was really, really, really great. And I love teaching, but I also love attending. I'm addicted to learning, and there was a couple of classes that I want to make some time, maybe tomorrow or the weekend, to kind of take. But if you sign up with the Alliance of Independent Authors now, I think that you can still have access to all the recordings from the conference. I don't know, there were like 30, 35 speakers. I think it was a huge conference. It was all virtual, authors all over the world. Get out there and learn. Get out there and take a class. You don't even have to leave your house or get a hotel or buy an airplane ticket. You can just sit and learn, and just even just to go to one of these virtual events and just to be able to network with other authors and ask questions and not feel so isolated, which is super helpful. All right, so the next one I'm also extremely passionate about. I will try to curtail all my comments, not knowing what your book is about, which I know sounds super crazy, right? Like, who doesn't know what the book is about? I cannot tell you how many times that I've been at a conference and during cocktail hour, right? And we're all networking, we're all talking, and I'll ask an author what their book is about, and they stumble all over the place. And I'm not trying to be mean, but we did a podcast on elevator pitches. Go back and listen to that podcast. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you have to have the best elevator pitch on the planet, but if you are telling people what your book is about and you're kind of rambling and it's like, well, it's a little bit about this, it's something about that. First off, you probably don't really know what your book's about, but you have not identified your, 1 to 2, at the most 3 sentence elevator pitch to really capture the audience. Part of the reason why this is important is obviously when you meet somebody, you want to be able to tell them what your book is about without rambling on. And I will tell you that in the majority of cases when this happens, I will leave that conversation still having no idea what the book is about. Literally will have no idea, not even what genre it is. Seriously. It's a problem. And being really focused on what your book is about will help you better to introduce the book when you do go to events. And if you're like, well, Penny, I don't need that because I never leave my house. Like, I get it. But you can use this in your pitches. You can use this in, if you are communicating, if you're putting together ads, being super clear on what your book is about and creating an elevator pitch. I realize that sounds a little bit like an advanced theory, but it is so crucially important. You will differentiate yourself from the pack. I can remember people that I've met at conferences, or even like somebody in email. If somebody emails us, and Amy gets a lot of these, we ask them what their book is about or whatever, and it's like 3 pages of an email, and it's still really unclear what the book is about. It just helps you to communicate your book better to your, the readers, your buyers, obviously, but also to the world. So that's just my thing. You want to take the last one? And there are so many more that we could be doing, but we sometimes we feel like we just go on, and I know we do, and you guys are so patient and you listen, hopefully to the end. But anyway, you want to take the last one?
Yes. So yeah, this is a big one. Overpricing your book to make up for the money you've invested. And let's put it right out there right away that we realize there is a small minority of individuals that go through certain publishers. I know this happens a lot with academic presses and everything, Penny, where it's just kind of the norm and understood that
they don't have a choice. Yeah,
they're going to be more expensive. But for the most part, it's a combination of either you're in charge of all your own stuff and you want to make up the money, or you're not prepared to advocate for yourself and to have those conversations with your publisher,
Yeah.
I think sometimes authors, again, we've done shows on this, they just assume everything the publisher does is in their best interest and the exact right thing to do, when it's always best to question and challenge and know what your options are. Maybe you don't end up changing your price when you have that conversation with your publisher, but at least you've had the conversation and you've educated yourself on where the rationale came from, why, they chose that pricing, things like that. But we see this a lot where authors will come out the gate and say, I'm making my book this price, and they give us all the pricing. And, I almost fall out of my chair thinking, okay, I'm going to be really honest. Sometimes I think these people don't buy books. because
Right,
like,
right, right.
have you bought a book recently? Like, did you pay that for the last book that you bought? Because I would be shocked if you did, you know? And the reality is, like it or not, there are different pricing expectations depending on your genre and topic as well. You know what I mean? So you can't be a genre fiction author demanding prices that are more aligned with, really technical business books, for example. You know what I mean? It's not all one and the same. And we get asked a lot, what should I do? What price should I pick? And we, let's just ruin it now. It's always going to be the same answer to everybody. We always encourage authors, double check, and we reference this a lot. Look at the bestseller list.
Yeah.
And you are going to see some variables on there, but know that, the big name authors, they're not necessarily charging more, but I assure you there is a pricing strategy based on their publishing schedule, when the next book is coming out, how long that book has been out. Nothing's by accident. They're not just closing their eyes and picking a price and hoping it works, So
Right.
Generally go with the middle of the pack, not necessarily household names, and look through a couple pages of that list and just kind of see where most of them are landing. And I think authors are often surprised, Penny, that not every author chooses to make their paperback dramatically more expensive than their ebook. I'm seeing that more and more now, where that gap is kind of closing a little bit. They might be charging a little bit more for their ebook, but they're also making their paperbacks more accessible as well. And I find that so fascinating when I get on to a bestseller list, and especially for big name authors, and kind of seeing their pricing strategy. I feel like I learn a lot every time I get on there. Just I try to check in every once in a while to kind of see what people are doing.
Yeah. 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 It's really, I think pricing strategies are we've done a whole show on pricing strategies. So that's, um, I'm really, really glad that we did the show. We always are here to help. That's the whole, again, premise of the 4 years that we've been doing this podcast. We love your ideas. So please send us your ideas wherever, you come across something that really kind of confuses you, like the author who emailed us this morning with the review and said, I have a question. And I thought that was awesome. But we love your show ideas and your reviews, as I mentioned. Wherever you listen to podcasts, I know sometimes it's a little tricky to post a review, but you're welcome to send it to us. And we'll add it to our bright and shiny brand new podcast page, which we just launched on our website. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.